Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining. My name's Nicole Galacci and I'm your host today. This is our mentorship session on finance and accounting, delivered by CareersNOW, which is Food and Beverage Ontario's workforce development initiative. We're offering job fairs to employers and job seekers. We are also holding these types of mentorship sessions to attract people into the wonderful food and beverage industry. There are so many meaningful career paths in this sector, and we're just doing our best to bring people in that will talk about their career paths and why they chose food, why they choose to stay in the food industry. And without further ado, I will pass it over. I should say we'll certainly take questions. You can write them in the chat and I will see those and ask the questions, just so that we don't get a crazy situation where lots of people are talking. And yeah, I'll start with Tiffany, if you'd like to go first. We are recording this session and I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I guess I'll start with, I'm a little bit surprised that I ended up in CPG myself. It certainly wasn't where I was planning to be. If you had asked me, in high school, I definitely would not have picked this, but I'm still very, very happy to have landed in CPG. I started my career at Tim Hortons, and Tim Hortons, as you know, is a very big chain in Canada and growing around the world. There are several lines of business in Tim Hortons, and one of those lines of business is manufacturing. So they manufacture all of their own coffee, as well as the fruits and fills that go inside their donuts and muffins. And that really sparked my my eagerness for learning more about manufacturing and looking at something and taking it from a raw input and turning it into something is very, very exciting for me. I am a little bit of a how it's made junkie, so seeing it and living it is really, really exciting. I will say that from a finance perspective, one of the greatest things is having the ability to get in and really understand all of the inputs and work with the operations teams to drive costs out of the business. It's just such an exciting role to be in, as opposed to other areas of finance, which for me, I'm very, very excited to kind of be where I am. I am a CPA, and again, if you had asked any of my math teachers in high school, I'm sure they would be shocked to find out that this is where I landed, because again, it wasn't where I thought I was going to be, but one of the benefits of being on the finance side is, the lifelong learning that comes with being a CPA, working with so many very smart people, coaching and working with teams of both finance individuals as well as operations. And again, living every day, the how it's made dream has been very, very satisfying for me in terms of my career.
That's awesome. And could you tell us a little bit about your current situation, where you work now and sort of your day to day?
Sure. So right now I'm working at New Stuff Baking, which is a company. There's actually two brands under New Stuff Baking. So one of them is a Italian pizzelle waffle cookie. Those are manufactured in Mississauga. We make about 2 million cookies a year, a little more than 2 million cookies a year. And then the other brand that we have is, I don't know if anybody here loves charcuterie boards as much as I do, but those little crispy crackers with fruits and nuts in them on charcuterie boards, that is made by our Key Naturals brand. So we have a plant in Vaughan that creates and distributes all of the crisps. We do a lot of private label business. So a lot of the stuff that you'll see in terms of Sobeys and Loblaws and some of the other big retailers, we do all of their crisps as well.
And maybe you can talk us a little bit through your actual progression. So, you mentioned you got your education, obviously your first position in Tim's. Could you talk us through where, how your now in this position as CFO?
For sure. So when I started, I was actually on a completely different career path. I was going through for occupational therapy, a bit ahead of the curve. And so when we finished school, there weren't any jobs. And so I started temping, which is how I landed at Tim Hortons. And I landed at Tim Hortons just as like a data entry clerk, and proved proficient at data entry clerk. And so they had an opening in accounts payable. I did accounts payable for a little while, and then I talked to the controller at the time and said, I'm really liking accounts payable, but I'd love to kind of learn fixed assets and rents and royalties. There's a whole bunch of lines of business at Tim Hortons. And so he said to me, well, if you really want to go anywhere in finance, you need to have a designation. And because I hadn't gone to university, I had gone the college route. At that time, there was 3 different designations. So there was CA, CMA, and CGA. And CGA had a degree exit requirement. So I applied for the CGA, and then kind of concurrently, as I was doing my schoolwork and getting my CPA as well as my degree, I kind of progressed through Tim Hortons. So I went from accounts payable, and then I moved over and I was doing fixed assets for a while, and then I did lease accounting, and then I did rents and royalties, and then finally I ended up in the distribution side of things. So I was kind of doing all of the financial analytics for their 5 distribution centers at the time. And from there, got really proficient at that. And so they kind of melded that with the manufacturing side. And it was once I saw the manufacturing side, I was like, this is me. This is what I love. Like going to the roasters and seeing, these big super sacks of green beans coming in and seeing them go through the whole roasting process really got my goat. And so Tim Hortons was purchased by 3G. And so I had kind of done all the lines of business within Tim Hortons and thought now is a pretty good time to make a career move. And so I moved from Tim Hortons over to Voortman Cookies. And at Voortman Cookies, they make obviously a plethora of cookies, Christmas cookies, amazing cookies. And so when I got there, that was, their facility in Burlington is spectacular. It's if anybody, they used to, before pre-COVID, they used to invite people in to see the facility in Burlington. And if they ever open that up again, I would strongly encourage anybody who's interested to go and see. It is spectacular what they do there. And so, and then from there, they were actually purchased by Hostess Brands. And I stayed for a little while after that. And then I thought, maybe it's time for me to make my move. So I had kind of progressed to senior director of finance, and then decided to throw my hat in the ring to try my hand as a CFO. And so now I'm CFO of New Stuff Baking.
That's amazing. I love your career progression, because I think most people would think that you'd gone to university and gone, this heavy, I always knew I wanted to be in finance sort of or accounting mindset. So I love, and this is typical, right? You zig, you zag, and you find out what's out there, and you end up in the position that you're in. I have a bunch of questions, but what I'll do is we'll go over to Marco next, and then obviously Dave, and then we will sort of have questions at the end, because I'll ask questions, but it'd be nice to have all of your different perspectives on the different questions that I have. So thanks, Tiffany. We'll be back in a minute.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Marco. I live in London, Ontario. Work for a company called Littman Family Farms, and we are North America's largest tomato grower, both open field and in the greenhouse side of it. So again, I grew up in London, went to Western University, got a business degree from Western, 4-year degree, the BMOS program. Took a job in Guelph after university for a manufacturer called Linamar. Learned my, ropes as really entry-level staff accountant. With them, a lot of manufacturing, cost accounting, fixed assets type of jobs, and just being curious, asking questions all the time was so important at that early stage of my career. Then romance took me to big city of Toronto to work for a couple of public companies, different industries, and I spent about 1.5 years in each of those ones. One was entertainment, one was software solutions. So again, a couple different industries I was in, and I encourage everybody to, don't if you're not like, if you want to experience something different or learn a little bit, be involved in a different business, to do that transition, take on a few different, go work for a couple different companies, see how they operate, kind of get the best of knowledge from those ones. So worked about 6 years or so through 3 different companies. Made the decision to move back to home, which was London, and got a job as an accounting manager for Littman Family Farms. Mainly, I was responsible for the protected ag, or the greenhouse side of things. Again, we grow tomatoes, which is everybody knows it's not too hard to get up in the morning. I love food, and it's definitely a really exciting industry to be involved in. It's a commodity market that's perishable, so shelf life, between you might get 3 weeks if best, but kind of 2 weeks is average for how the tomato would fare, so to speak. Some things are quite frustrating in the industry, is if you grow really well, you have good yield, the quality is really good, you make good delivery to customers, but the market, it's a commodity, so the market could be swamped with everybody having good tomatoes. So it's really, it's exciting to be involved in that, and it switches every week. So as an accounting manager, yeah, my role is mostly tell executives within the company how we are performing, a lot of forecasting, a lot of budgeting, leading the team in day-to-day financial operations. That's paying vendors, collecting money from customers, and paying your employees. So it's exciting at that accounting manager role. You're really into like the weeds of things, but you do have to get that view above to just understand the whole picture and how it all fits together. So I guess, yeah, I told you everybody how I got here. Maybe just some career advice. I was talking with my CFO the other day, and we just hired a girl to come on board, and he knew her from playing a game of cards and just liked her personality that way. So it was interesting. Like, you never really know who you're going to meet, and your impression can go a long way on those first things. So encourage everybody to just be the best themselves, and network a little bit helps as well, to kind of getting a job or into finance and accounting.
That's a good segue, because I was going to ask, who do you work with? Like, who's in your team? You talked to us a little bit about you work under your CFO, obviously, but who else do you work with in the team?
Yeah, normally, I'd say the typical structure is you have a payables team who pays all your vendors. So there's a few people under that team. You have a collections team that supports sales with invoicing and helping them to collect money. Then you have a couple of staff accountants who more or less, crunch through numbers, build budgets, complete yearly tax returns, go through internal audits, yearly tax returns as well. So that's typically, I'd say, at a base level, how the team is structured. And again, you never, like, even though you might have one job, you're always kind of learning different things along the way, and being pulled in different projects and directions. With technology, you could be involved in a new system implementation, which sometimes is pretty frustrating, but they're for the better. They're supposed to be for the better.
I was going to say onwards, right? The technical innovations, and and I think the food industry is one that there are misconceptions that it's very old-fashioned, and that's, you know, some organizations are still a little bit like that, but I think we're definitely moving in the right direction in order to attract the next generation, because there is more automation and robotics and that type of thing as well. So awesome. I know we're getting some questions, but I'm just going to go over to Dave so that everyone has a good understanding of our three speakers, and then we can definitely go into the question piece. So thank you so much, Marco. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Nicole. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Robertson. I've been in the food industry for a little over 11 years now, and I'm currently working at a company called Sargent Farms in Milton, which is a chicken processor. We sell to large retailers such as Costco and Farm Boy, and we also have our own local retail stores in Mississauga and Milton, so we sell direct to consumer as well. I've been in this organization since September 2020, and I currently hold the Director of Finance position, where I'm responsible for overseeing all aspects of finance and accounting, from budgeting and forecasting to, you know, similar to what Marco just mentioned, the AP and the AR functions. If I was to go back to the beginning of my career, I graduated from Brock University with a business degree. And candidly, I was quite unclear, I think similar to Tiffany, about where I wanted to take my career. And I actually started in the recruiting sector, where I was recruiting for electricians, millwrights, engineers. And while it was a really good experience, understanding how to work with people and negotiate, it really wasn't where I wanted to go with my career. After being in that industry for about 3 years, I was really fortunate to land a position at Maple Leaf Foods, where I was for a little over 10 years. And before I even got into finance there, I actually started in the purchasing department, where I helped, at the time, Maple Leaf Foods also owned Canada Bread. So there was about 50, 60 plants across Canada. I helped them implement SAP from a purchasing perspective and ensuring that they were working with preferred vendors. Again, it was a fun job. It was a great entry-level position, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. It was at that point I figured I really needed to start to take my career a little more serious and have a bit of a path. So I pursued the CMA designation. Once I'd made that decision, I really started to go around and network within the Maple Leaf community with the finance people and to try and get myself within the finance department. And I was really fortunate to land an opportunity in the category finance department. And it was just, you know, if there was a finance department where you'd want to be introduced to, in my mind, it was that, because I found it extremely exciting. I was working with marketers and sales reps on product innovation, on pricing strategies. Sometimes with commodities going up, we were having to work on price increases. Then also having to do the overall category management, where we would be analyzing the business, looking at variances from a pricing perspective, trade, looking at our overall portfolio mix. So you were really getting a really great overall view of business management. It wasn't necessarily just finance. I had a lot of fun there. I actually was able to move into progressive roles throughout the category finance team, and then moved on to the sales side of the business, where I was the finance manager for the Loblaw customer sales team. And then eventually moved into the operations side of the business. And it's kind of similar to what Tiffany had mentioned earlier. You know, it's a penny business. The margins aren't extremely healthy, well, at least in my experience. So pennies matter. So really understanding where you can drive cost savings and cost efficiencies, it really forces you to put a pulse on the entire business and looking for ways to execute, you know, whether it's good pricing strategies to drive more volume through the facility, or if you're looking to improve yields. There's just so many aspects of the finance realm that, you know, you can actually see your work make a direct impact on the business. And it's certainly not a glamorous industry, but it really does force you to be on top of your business. And it's just, in my mind, it's been a great learning experience, over the past 11 years that I've had in the industry.
That's awesome. There was one point that you made, and I've worked with students and grads for a long time, and I love the point that you made that when you were at Made for Leaf, instead of leaving, you had a plan and you networked within the company. I think that's really key. I think a lot of the time people think, well, if I need to make a move, I need to leave. And then that, you have worn a recruiter hat as well, which is unique, that you've done both. But as you know, then that always causes a little bit of a red flag if you keep job hopping. So I think that's a good advice for people starting out in their career, that, network within your organization, ask questions. I love that.
Yeah. You nailed it. I never wanted to be perceived as a job hopper, because I know that doesn't long-term look really good on someone's resume. And I don't really feel you get the full learning experience within an organization. And I felt like at the time I was with an organization big enough that I could explore a lot of different opportunities. And, really the ball is in your own court to be proactive and get things done if you want to be successful, right? People aren't going to sit back and give you something. You got to go after it yourself, right?
Yeah. Well, I have you in the hot seat, Dave. We have a question. I'm currently pursuing bachelor's in commerce, majoring in accounting with co-op at the University of Guelph. What should be my next step after doing my degree to have a bright future or career in the field of accounting? Once people graduate, what would you recommend?
I think it's a tricky one, because it's different for everybody. But a couple of things I would recommend would be starting the CPA path as soon as possible and starting to get the wheels in motion for that. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it is a really nice to have for entry-level positions, and it shows that you are taking it serious. And then secondly, I know there some of the bigger companies have like learning development trainee programs. I would be encouraged to start going onto websites and seeing where those opportunities exist. As an example, I know Maple Leaf Foods have a leadership program where they give individuals, a position for a year, and then they rotate for 3 years, and it gives them a really broad experience. So I think that would be another option. And then in general, just network, and don't be afraid to ask if you can even have a Zoom call with a finance manager or a director of finance in companies around your area, just to see if there's any openings or anything that you can, leverage from that as well.
That's a great answer. Tiffany, do you have anything to add there?
Hey there. I would really agree with everything that Dave said. The other thing that is very, very helpful and has been helpful to me is when you do get in with a company, have some fire and really dig in and show and prove your worth. There's a lot of sound bites around the benefits of having a mentor. But you can't ask for a mentor. You have to find somebody who wants to be your mentor. And the way that you find a really good mentor is you show up and you're your best self every single day. And so I've had the benefit through my career of having 2, 3 really, really great mentors who have helped me get to where I am. But I never asked them to be my mentor. They just kind of took me under their wing, gave me really, really great opportunities that were kind of outside, especially at Tim Hortons. I was at a finance manager level well before I had my CPA designation. And that was because I had people who were really looking out for me and looking to coach me and help me in my career progression. But you don't get that by asking. You get that by showing your worth and getting somebody to really want to help you get where you want to be.
That's great advice. Marco, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Sure. Yeah. Just everybody's used the impression in the back of the day where accounting is kind of like boring, soulless job, but that's totally not the case. Finance and accounting people are really personal people who actually, have to develop relationships within the company, within their coworkers. So it's really, you have to be a people person to do well and communicate with other departments. That's definitely an important aspect in the accounting careers.
What other departments do you work with? Like we've talked about the accounting department, but which other departments would you say you're working the most with? Like, I'll go around everybody. But.
Cool. Yeah. So at Littman, I'm working with the growing team to look at their budget of the year, look at what their yield's going to be, how much we're spending, and spend. Again, it's a very thin margin business. So looking at improvements, maybe making some suggestions, taking inflation into account. As we know, it was like 4% last year. A lot of different costs have increased, freight, packaging, to just name a few. Also working with sales to show them who are their top customers, what products that we're selling into those customers are doing well, what's not well. You're working with ownership structure just to give that overall picture of how the business is doing. Those are the kind of the main people I'm talking to on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And Dave, how about yourself?
I think you work with everybody especially in a smaller company. We're working with ownership, sales, marketing, operations, maintenance, QA, IT. We're involved in everything.
That brings me on to another question. A lot of the time, a new grad will say to me, where should I start my career? Should I look for positions at smaller companies, or should I look at the larger companies? And I know you touched on Maple Leaf because of the leadership program, but from your experience, what would your advice be? And what are the differences, like the main differences, big versus small?
Is that for me?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. It's such a hard question. So with public companies that are big in structure, your job is a little more narrow. With private companies, especially at the entry-level positions, with private companies, you can actually touch a lot more off the P&L and the overall, the finance picture. So it really does depend what you want to do in your career. I don't want to be, I don't want to sit on the fence with this. It really does depend on the individual.
And Tiffany, what would you say?
I think that Dave covered it off really, really well. There's definitely benefits to both. I will say, coming from Tim Hortons, so Tim Hortons has a very a close program to what Dave described of Maple Leaf, where they look for new grads coming in, and it's actually, I think, a 2-year cycle. So really, really great programs available out there. But for sure, when I moved from Tim Hortons to Voortman Cookies, smaller family-run business that had just been purchased by private equity, I will say that as the controller there, I touched basically everything. I got involved in all of the different facets. I was able to learn more about purchasing and logistics and things that over my 18-year career at Tim Hortons, I had seen little bits and pieces of, but got to holistically touch all of those at the same time at a smaller company.
Yeah, I definitely attest to that. That's what I hear, in terms of you wear more hats in a smaller company, and you're pulled into different things because of less resources. And there's good and bad with both, right? There's a smaller company, you may have less processes and procedures in place, and it might be a little bit more hectic at times, whereas a larger has more of that structure. But yeah, it's just different.
Well, and I would say that that some of the challenges of the smaller business, can also become opportunities. So, where large companies, segregation of duties is not usually ever an issue because there's lots of people to do everything, and you can really easily kind of manage that. It becomes a little bit more of a challenge, as you said, with a smaller company, but it just, it's a puzzle. You put it together and you figure it out, and it's usually smaller companies, you have like a tighter knit team because there's just far fewer of you. So it's a different experience than working at a very big company where, when you start out, you're kind of a number when you first start, and you have to do a little bit more to prove yourself and really shine, as opposed to a smaller company where there's not as much competition.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to switch gears a little bit in terms of, I think we've talked about the actual role that you have, and we probably will have more questions around that. But if we could talk about the industry a little bit more. You are in the food industry. You went from food service to manufacturing. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about working in the food and beverage industry?
I think you touched on one of them in terms of just the rigor of processes, and that the misconception is that food is not really cutting edge, where I would absolutely, having seen kind of the manufacturing that happens at both Tim's as well as Vortman Cookies, definitely cutting edge in terms of process. We're getting there here at New Stuff Baking. Very, very exciting advancements happening. I would say that some of the challenges would be what Marco was talking about in terms of just shelf life. So I've always worked at places that have very, very short shelf life, and so there's lots of spoils, and just managing that can be very, very challenging. And I often say someday I'm going to work for Clorox or like a cleaning company where you don't have those same considerations. I know, Dave, you're probably the same way with chicken, like it goes bad so fast. So there's just so much more consideration that you need to put into in terms of inventory controls. But that, while it's a challenge, also makes it quite exciting because there are so many things all the time that you're kind of looking at and reviewing.
Dave, what would you add there in terms of misconceptions?
I would just add to that I think food companies are some of the best run businesses out there because of some of those challenges that Tiffany just spoke about. Like, you really have to manage your inventory really tightly. A lot of the markets that we're in are based on commodities. So you have to have a really close pulse on the commodity markets. And then you really need to be in the loop with consumer trends to ensure that the products that you're offering are not good for only now, but within the next 6 months to a year and beyond. So you really do have to have a really good pulse on the entire business.
Mm-hmm. Marco, do you have anything to add there? Misconceptions, what you love about the industry?
I'll give you an example. I'm sure a lot of companies have been pretty progressive with utilizing technology. So if you can remember, everything used to be paper, right? And with COVID, work from home, food, and I'm sure all industries had to really pivot to be a bit more digital. And that's like saving down all of your important documents digitally, managing it through workflows or whatnot. So again, we're really open to technology and utilizing those efficiencies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I've done a lot of school visits, with people that are in those more generic spaces like engineers, or I found it really interesting. I went to McMaster a couple of years ago now, and there was like 200 engineers in the room, and not maybe 2 had considered working in the food and beverage industry. The rest were looking at consulting and other things. And I think this is a very similar area, finance and accounting. There's certain pathways. Would you agree, Marco, that like you're kind of expected to look at rather than almost like an expert in an industry?
Because you'd be, if you were in consulting, you'd have to, work in a number of different industries. Whereas, if you are in food, it's a little bit different across companies. But yeah, generally you'd be like a food expert. How stuff goes to table, and a lot of the food safety guidelines that are required. So yeah, there are a lot of things that go into that for sure.
Tiffany, did you have something to add there?
I don't think so. I think that that Marco covered it off well.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, as I say, I'm always encouraging students and grads to look at at the food industry as a whole. And, you know, having you come in today and speak to us, what would you, in terms of in your role as hiring managers now, like you've progressed in your career, and so obviously you're a hiring manager in your role now, what would you say are the top 3 characteristics, or maybe it's qualifications, something, the top 3 that you look for when you have a new role and you know, you're looking at perhaps new grads to bring into the organization?
I would say first and foremost, I'm looking for a good attitude. So I'm under the proviso that anybody that's coming in to apply is going to have the financial acumen that I need and or the proficiency to learn. So, you know, there's a lot of areas where, you know, you might not have done it before, but as long as you're coming in and you're eager to learn, that's definitely key. But I think, I don't remember if it was Dave or Marco earlier that mentioned, finance touches every single division of a company and everybody. You will eventually be touching everybody. Not physically, but, you know, metaphorically. and so you really do need to have, you know, a good attitude, a can-do. I want to work with you. I want to be your business partner. You know, part of the challenge of finance is that you're talking up and you're talking down. So, you know, there's a way that I need to present results to my board of directors, which is completely different than how I need to speak to an operations manager and help them understand, you know, the decisions that they're making and the financial ramifications of those decisions on the floor. So I would just say I'm really looking for attitude. That's first and foremost for me. You know, the main thing I'm looking at. And I can tell usually when I sit down with somebody, I always say, you know, if it's somebody that I can imagine myself having a beer with, then they're the right person for my team, because I need that type of personality to be a real true business partner in a finance role in a CPG company.
Awesome. And Marco, what would your top 3 prerequisites be?
Yeah, Tiffany hit the head on the nail there for sure. I might maybe I just add, like, you know, eagerness and like openness to take on some things you might not think you want to be involved in, and that's a good thing. So, you know, your manager might think you're capable of doing something new or something different, so take that as a positive feedback. And again, you know, you don't necessarily have to hit all of the requirements in the job posting. Generally, you know, nice to haves if you do hit most of them, but people are in this market, you know, with there are quite a few job postings open and generally not enough candidates. You know, feel free to yeah.
Send your resume.
Yeah.
And Dave, what about you? The top 3 pieces of advice you would offer?
Yeah.
Oh, well, sorry. Yeah, you know the question.
Yeah. I think Tiffany nailed it. I think you want someone who's a business partner. That is the mindset you want to have, because that's someone who's going to come in there and work hard and get to understand the business, and not necessarily just the numbers that they're looking at, but understand the why and the what behind it all. And, you know, a pet peeve of mine is always hearing people say, that's not my job. You know, drives me nuts, because that was never who I was, and that helps nobody in their career. You always got to be asking for more and trying to take on new projects so you can continually learn and develop yourself, right?
I think to add to that, one of the other pet peeves I hear all the time is, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that's fabulous. But I would say also getting into a role, because of the tight margins and because of, you know, the landscape of what you're working at, you have to be confident and comfortable enough to have some tough conversations sometimes. You know, ask why 5 times. Just because you've always done it that way doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And I think having the mindset that, you know, you're not coming locked in with like blinders on, that this is the way finance happens, that you're open to having discussions and exploring different ways of doing things. And, you know, I always try to, you know, encourage people to have a mindset where, you know, assume that everything's coming from a place of good, that people aren't, you know, it's not a pessimistic mindset. You always want to be optimistic and and just have that lens when you're looking at things. And I'm not taking a dig at something because I think that there's a mistake or a problem. I'm really genuinely trying to understand it better so that we can look at it together and see if there's a better way of doing things.
Yeah, I think that can happen a lot in family run sort of smaller businesses. I think, you know, again, goes back to the resources and the generations that just take on the same patterns, and then things don't change. And that can be a challenge to attract, you know, the youth of today into an industry that they already maybe have perceived as a little old-fashioned in some circumstances. So another thing I was going to ask you is, obviously in a better climate, I know that hiring right now is very challenging across the board. Would you always have looked for somebody in the food industry first? Because this is something that I do tell students and grads, whether they're engineering or finance and accounting or HR, that and certainly with my recruiter hat on, when I am past a search, typically the client wants to see somebody with that hands-on industry experience. Would you say that's the same for you, or do you look for people that are outside of the industry? Maybe Tiffany, you want to go first on that?
Sure, I would say that as a hiring manager, for sure, if you're coming to the table with prior experience, it will make the onboarding a little bit easier, just in terms of like, there's certain nuances with just understanding costing in a manufacturing environment that somebody coming from, say, you know, a finance background, like a banking industry. I would say that I would give preference to candidates where I see they've got some tangible, but I'm not suggesting that, you know, I wouldn't look at other people, as long as, again, you know, to reiterate, as long as you've got the right attitude and you're coming to the job and the role with like fire and you really want to learn, I would hire anybody. But I would say that if you do have kind of some food processing background, that would definitely, you know, put you a little bit ahead of some of the other, you know, if you're coming from, you know, a real estate background or a banking background, just because those industries are very different from manufacturing food.
Mm. Marco or Dave, anything to add there?
Marco, you want to
Go
go?
go ahead. No, go first, Dave. Go.
No, I mean, I don't have much to add to that. I think I would agree with that. And if they didn't necessarily have food manufacturing experience, just some level of manufacturing experience would definitely be the second thing I'd be looking for. But again, I think we've all said it in different ways. Attitude trumps, I think, everything, because you can train people if they have the right attitude.
How do you convey that on a resume? That's a good one. Whoever wants to. I know I have my ideas and I talk all the time to people, but I think it's so prevalent to have you say when people are applying to, you're the person that they're trying to get their resume in front of. So what jumps off the resume to you?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. For me, it's when they demonstrate or are able to articulate where they've improved processes, when they've worked on teams and collaborated with other like functions and have worked on big scale things that have produced like great results. Like those, I'm just looking for things where they've gone above and beyond would be really what I'm looking for, versus just I did this, I did that, like just the very generic job description. I'd be wanting them to enhance some of the cool experiences they've had in their employment career so far.
Yeah, something that is not maybe resume minded, but it's more like the networking, messaging people on LinkedIn, and like not poking them hard enough that they'll be interested to give you a call from that.
Yeah, I'm usually looking, when I look at resumes, I'm looking for something that grabs my attention, because, you know, when you post for a financial analyst role, you're going to be up against a scad of people who are also applying for, especially at an entry-level role. So you really want to put something, a bullet at the beginning, maybe in your kind of like brief introduction, that really grabs the attention of the people who are flipping through hundreds of resumes. And I will say, just use that business partner lens when you're speaking. So speaking, kind of mirroring what Dave had said, talk about how you work with people, what you've done with people, more team minded in terms of using I all the time, because that doesn't convey the right mindset. I think when you're reading a resume and it's all I, that might show that yes, you have the skills, but you don't really have that kind of team attitude that people are looking for these days.
That's great advice. And I think, Dave, you mentioned the transferable skills, that even if it's not food and beverage, manufacturing, those are transferable, and it's picking out those right words that will, put your resume to the top because it's transferable skills. I think people do get overwhelmed with information on soft skills, transferable skills, and it can get, it can become overwhelming. And I think a lot of students and new grads get confused about what they should be adding to their resume and how they should present it. And I said there's no one way to present a resume, in terms of the format. It's not this magic, format. It is in the experience you bring. What do you think of volunteer work and that type of thing? What sort of thing, obviously they're trying to get internships and a co-op opportunity perhaps, and highlight that, especially if it's in the food and beverage industry. If they were to add volunteer work, what sort of things could you say, this would show up as something that would show me that you could fit in our team? Dave,
I think community work, volunteer work, even showing extracurricular activities that you do. I think all that stuff allows the hiring manager to get a holistic picture of what this person is all about. And just as you were talking there, the word that came to mind for me is just be authentic. Like, just you need your resume to be accurate and not have errors, because you're applying for a finance position, and typically attention to detail is a big thing that is required in this role. So I would say step one is make sure that your resume is error-free.
Yes.
But be authentic. It would be the next part. Like, don't try and be somebody you're not, because that's not going to help you along the process at all.
And different personalities.
Sorry, I would say also, I know there's lots of firms out there that will help you write your resume, and you might be, attracted to that because you feel like that would be very, very helpful. And while you can use them as a resource, back to the authenticity, I would definitely encourage you to do your best to write your own resume, because I will tell you, as a hiring manager, I can pick all of the ones that were done by the same firm, because they have a standard template that they work from. They have all the same words, all the same lingo. And as a hiring manager, I can tell if you wrote your resume or not, because there will be probably 10 that look exactly the same, except for a couple of keyword changes and the name and the address. And that, for me, I put those aside, because for me, that tells me that you're not really interested in doing your own work. You're leveraging somebody else to do your, I'm not saying that you're, cheating, lying, none of that, but just authenticity is definitely key.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add, like, community work, volunteer work is definitely, great to have on the resume. As Dave said, but don't discount, like, if you, as a new grad, you're in university, and you're also working a couple part-time jobs to support yourself. So, like, include, like, I've worked 15 hours, 20 hours a week on this part-time job, and that's like, wow, like, you're managing you're paying your bills and you're going to school. So that's a good thing to highlight, that aspect of it.
That's great advice. The multitasking, the organizational skills, all these types of soft skills, again, I think it's a challenge to recognize what they are. Like, people will think, oh, I don't have any of that stuff, and not realize, exactly what they're doing in their day-to-day. And just furthermore, I know we're reaching the end, but with regards to cover letters, I know I get that question a lot, should I bother anymore? And I always think they're a great spot for the extra stuff. Things that don't necessarily fit on the resume, especially with social media now. It's a place where you can add certain experiences, or, if you've written a blog about, for example, we have students and grads that have partaken in blog writing for food grads. And, rather than just sitting in your interview saying, I'm interested in this or that, you can actually point to some published work, perhaps, that you've done, or you know, that type of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think it's great advice to be authentic, like you said, to not be the cookie cutter mold.
Mm-hmm.
Any last final thoughts before we say goodbye to our attendees?
I would just say that I think you guys are on definitely the right path. Finance and accounting, you know, there's great earning potential. One of the things that really drew me into finance and accounting was the lifelong learning. So there's, you know, regular CPD requirements every year. So you're always kind of learning new and better ways to do things. You know, and, you know, maybe I'm just the only kind of geeky junkie on here that loves how it's made, but like living it every day is definitely what makes it worthwhile for me. And just the ability to kind of get in there and really understand, it's like a giant puzzle, putting it together and working with so many teams cross-functionally. I think you'll get a lot of satisfaction from your career if you explore a finance and accounting role in food and beverage, for sure.
Awesome. Well, anybody else, Dave? You have anything to add there? Or you
I would
ready
just say
for?
we all have to eat, so it's
Mhm.
you know, it's hard not to be passionate about food, if you ask me. And you know, there's all different types of food sectors, you know, within the industry that, you know, whether you're vegetarian or whatever it may be, like there are paths for everybody. And I think it's a really high, fast-paced environment, great learning opportunities. And the last thing I would say is it's actually relatively small, you know, of a network, relatively speaking. Like a lot of people know, a lot of people work with people. So just don't be afraid to network and reach out to people, because while they may not have opportunities right now, they might know somebody who does. So just keep that web open as much as you can.
Marco, final word, or are you?
Yeah, Tiffany and Dave are great speakers, and you know, really pointed a great picture there.
Awesome. Well, again, I really appreciate you spending the time to chat with us today and share your knowledge and your career path with our audience today. We do have a place that job seekers can go to, CareersNOW. The link is in the chat here, CareersNOW Job Seeker, where you can access future sessions that are coming up. The next one is with HR professionals. And you can also access the past sessions we have. And they're really cool, even if it's not necessarily something that you want to move into. It's just interesting to hear people's different career paths. I'm a junkie when it comes to that stuff. So I love hearing people, how they zigged and they zagged. And that's one of the things I found so interesting in recruitment and working in this industry. And it's one of the reasons I started Food Grads is people would say, you know, I never started out in food and beverage. It wasn't my plan. I zigged and I zagged and I ended up here. And I thought, you know, that's really interesting that beer is something that we all partake in at least 3 times a day or more. You know, we all eat, yet it's not necessarily something that comes to mind immediately when people are choosing their career. So, you know, it's people like yourselves that will talk about your career paths. It's how we'll encourage people into this wonderful industry. And we need people to pursue careers in this industry for sure. So again, thank you so much. Go to job seekers, go to the portal there, the CareersNOW Job Seeker portal for these sessions, for job fairs, also micro credentials that you can gain. They're all free. And thank you so much. Have a great evening. And again, thank you so much for giving up your time, Dave, Tiffany, and Marco.